Good evening, and welcome to the Dark Path. Hello everybody, and welcome to episode 5 of The Dark Path. And in keeping with last week's theme, we will be presenting Ghosts of the Military. We'll be right back to get things started.
Hi, this is Sam. You're listening to The Paranormal Path, hosted by my dad, Alan Mills.
Welcome back, everybody, and tonight we will be discussing true ghost stories from the military, specifically haunted military bases. All our stories tonight come to us courtesy of ArmyWife101.com. To check them out, go to my website, theparanormalpath.wixsite.com/PPAM2. Our first story comes to us tonight from the Linden Oaks area of Fort Bragg, North Carolina. The base was built in 1918. I no longer live in Linden Oaks. My husband retired at the end of last year. I had several things go on, and I have no doubt there was a presence in that house. It started when we moved in, and I noticed my children did not like to play upstairs. This is unusual, as we had had 2-story homes the whole time we were in the Army, and no one had been afraid to play alone before. I have 3 boys who were in kindergarten, grade 3, and grade 4 when we moved in. They would only go upstairs if they could go with another kid. Sometimes at night we would hear running. My husband or I would get up at night thinking the boys were running around the halls and find them all asleep. We had no neighbors at the time. One day I was doing laundry, and I went into the master bathroom and hung up a hand towel. I walked back to the dryer to get out the bathroom rug, and when I got back to the bathroom, the shower curtain was hanging halfway off. Someone had undone all the rings on one half. I stood there dumbfounded, trying to reason with myself that maybe I had done it, when there was no way I reasoned that I could have. I hadn't even gone in where the tub was. It made me wonder if I was losing my shit. I simply told it I don't have time to play today, and went downstairs to finish something else. I told my husband later, and he told me that several times something would knock on the bathroom door, and he would open it thinking it was me, and nothing was there. I felt something blow on my neck one night while on our computer downstairs. I thought it was my husband. I turned around and said, "Cut it out," only to find I was completely alone. I ran upstairs, past 3 sleeping kids, and jumped into bed with a snoring husband. There were other things that had happened, and I like to think of myself as a rational person, but I could not explain those experiences in that house. We'll be right back with another great story.
Hi guys, you're listening to The Dark Path, hosted by Alan Mills. This one's going to be great. Stick around.
Our next story comes to us from Fort Polk, Louisiana. In 2010, we moved to Fort Polk. After we got settled into our house, which we kinda had to fight to get, we were relieved that we did not get one of the newer homes and were in an older, larger home. I never had the feeling of any negative presence in the house, but the kids, then 1 and 3, started not wanting to be in certain parts of the house. One particular area was just up towards the top of the stairs. I chalked it up to them just being not used to the house yet and getting used to a new environment. Soon that changed. Whenever my husband was away at night duty or in the field, the kids and I would be downstairs and hear someone literally walk across the floor upstairs. The floor would creak all the way across and then back again. It totally freaked us out. We spent a few nights on the couch together. I was so scared, but would check the house and never find anything. all the time wearing my brave face, so the kids would be reassured that they were safe. I thought perhaps a raccoon had walked across the roof or something. It wasn't a raccoon. One night my husband was in the field, the kids were in bed, and I was headed downstairs to the kitchen. I saw a man at the bottom of the stairs. He was dressed in old black navy pants with big pockets, black jump boots, and a solid black shirt with an all-black hat. I was startled, but did not feel threatened. I was frozen with fear, but the man at the bottom of the stairs just looked up slowly and had a half smile and then faded away. I almost peed in my pants. I, again being skeptical, figured it was the low lights reflecting off of objects in the house and carried on. Boy, was I wrong. This man began to only appear when my husband was away at night. Could it be my overactive imagination? Well, time went on and other things began to happen. Then my mother came to visit and stay with us for a while. I had not even mentioned the man to her. One evening she came around the corner and ran smack into my husband. I could hear the papers that went flying into the air, and she immediately said, "Oh, excuse me, I'm so sorry." But my husband was not home, and there were no papers anywhere. She had run into the man. Sometime later, I was casually asking the neighbors, whose house was connected to ours at the garage, if they ever heard anything strange. I didn't want to sound crazy, so I ran with the animal on the roof theory. Long story short, she had the same man at her house, but only when her husband was gone overnight. Another neighbor had a conversation with me about the same thing 2 weeks before she moved off post and broke her lease. The man now had a name. One day her 3-year-old daughter was playing up in her room 2 houses away from ours on the same cul-de-sac and was talking to herself. Her mom was worried because the night before the man was on her back porch looking into the house from a dark corner of the screened-in porch. So she asked who she was talking to. Her daughter replied, "My friend." She figured it was an imaginary friend that her daughter had made up as a way to deal with her daddy being away. Big fat nope on that one. Later that night, her daughter came downstairs and threw her favorite doll in the trash. When asked why, her daughter replied, "Because, Mommy, my friend said he won't play with me anymore if I don't throw her away." My neighbor asked her if her friend had a name. She replied, "Yes, Mommy, his name is Tommy." Oh my gosh. Well, apparently Tommy was a night watchman who looked after the families while the men were away and only patrolled the houses on our cul-de-sac. It was kind of funny that his name was Tom, and he was always peeking in on us. I was fine with Tom visiting since we never felt anything threatening. I did ask him to please stop startling us, but told him that he was welcome to visit as long as no harm was done. He stayed. Now Tom was a protector. However, the house next door on the other side, just outside of our cul-de-sac, had a mean, evil male presence there. We were so glad we didn't get that house. Glasses of water would get thrown against the walls, the furniture actually moved, and the man in that house would leave impressions in the furniture when he was sitting on it. Sounds crazy, I totally know. Believe me, huge skeptic here. The previous tenants that we met when we moved in were getting ready to move to Fort Carson, and they actually had the TV show Taps come out to their house and record it. The Taps team advised them to take their kids and get out. At the end, I was fine with our peeping Tom, and thankfully that he wasn't the guy next door. I miss Fort Polk and the small community there, but I don't miss the events and hauntings there. Our next story comes to us from the McNair housing area of Fort Hood, Texas. I have been here since February 2011. When we first moved in, we never felt that at-home feeling, like we usually do after we get all settled in. After a few months, my daughter, who was 3 at the time, started to wake up every night screaming, saying, "No, no, no." I, of course, thought these were night terrors and tried my best to comfort her as much as I could. I then started to notice her talking up to the ceiling in her room by herself, and basically anywhere in a small space. It started to make my husband quite nervous, so I of course asked her who she was talking to. She told us it was her friend. I initially and logically thought, oh, okay, she has an imaginary friend. But when asked what she looked like, my daughter put her hands up and made a creepy face and growled. So, after that experience, which petrified my husband, I just went on and didn't let anything bother me. I figured if something was there, and as long as it was not bothering me or my family, who cares? Soon after that experience, my husband deployed. My daughter continued with the terrors and talking for a few more months. Then, just all of a sudden, it stopped. Of course, I didn't even question it. During this deployment, about midway through, I had some friends over for dinner and drinks. While we were just sitting there, her husband stopped and reacted in a strange way as he jumped up and turned around. He said he heard a girl say hi behind him, behind the couch. At this time, my daughter was upstairs asleep in her room. This made him so uncomfortable, he wouldn't come back into the home again. I again did not hear anything. After the return of my husband is when things started to get a little out of hand. He kept hearing a soft humming of a little girl singing near the stairs. After the return of my husband is when things started to get a little out of hand. He kept hearing a soft humming of a little girl singing near the stairs. He would go and check on our daughter, who was now almost 4. Every time he checked, she was always asleep. He started to feel so uneasy that we started to sleep downstairs. While we would sleep downstairs, he would wake me up frightened because he said he saw feet coming down the stairs, as if our daughter was awake and walking down. But then nothing. He said he would always see just the feet. So we started to really get suspicious of the house. Was it a little girl? Were we just hearing our neighbors? Are we crazy? To help him be more comfortable at home, I began to do a lot, and I mean a lot of research. I found out some pretty interesting things about this area. If you have time, just Google McNair or Fort Hood history. Anyway, we also have a pretty creepy all-concrete basement. From day one, I have never been able to go downstairs after dark. Well, after my husband came home, we started to feel a rumble under our feet. Yes, a full-blown rumble. We thought, hey, maybe the neighbors are running around, but no one was home. Well, during this entire time, little things kept happening to my husband. His friends who would stay over wouldn't come back because of some of the creepy things or feelings of being stared at. But for me, I guess I just ignored it until one particular night. We finally decided to sleep upstairs, and I was so happy. I was sleeping so good, and it was really late when all of a sudden the bed shook. Pretty hard, as if my daughter woke and was trying to wake me up, but out of childhood fear, I kept my eyes closed and waited. Nothing. So I sat there with my eyes closed. I started to think smart. I said to myself, okay, my husband could have moved, or the dog could have moved. So I waited. My husband moved, but it wasn't the same. My dog moved, but it wasn't the same. Then, all of a sudden, right by my face, the bed shook again, harder and harder. Just a hard, aggressive wake-up nudge right by my face. I froze in fear and screamed, "Leave me alone!" I stayed awake the rest of the night in fear. That morning, I told my husband, and yet again, we began to sleep downstairs. After a couple of days of this event happening to me, I began to notice more weird, unexplainable things. But then one night in particular, my husband and I began to argue. Pretty heated since we are both stubborn. I finally yelled at him and said, "Just leave me alone, I'm going to sleep, don't talk to me." He agreed and turned over on his part of the couch, and I turned over on mine. Not too long after, I hear my name, like a loud, clear enough voice that I jumped up thinking it was him and yelled at him, saying, "I told you not to speak to me." He had no idea what I was talking about. I was so confused that I just said, "Never mind." It was so clear that I answered it, whoever it was. This became the moment I was really alert on why everyone was scared. My friends would come over and feel a weird feeling. The ones who would stay the night would say that they felt like someone was looking at them in the kitchen or while they laid on the couch. Most refused to ever spend the night again, or be in the home alone. Every night we close the closet doors upstairs, and every morning they are open. We bolt the basement door to wake up every morning to it looking like it was trying to open, and so much more. We had a neighbor who, after asking if they ever felt anything weird, admits she actually slept with a satanic Bible on one nightstand and a regular Bible on the other. I'm not religious, but that was a little freaky to hear. She doesn't live here anymore, but the activity still remains. This continues still to this day. With the most recent activity is when I was outside with a friend and my husband with our kids and my dog. Through my upstairs window, the light came on and the blinds were shaking, like somebody was standing there shaking them. But we were all outside. No one was in the house. I could go on and tell every single crazy thing that has happened, but we would be here all day. We still live in McNair, still to this day. Same house, same creepy noises, still can't go downstairs, still hear the rumbles and the humming, and every person who comes over to my home does not like to come back. We'll be right back with our final story of the evening. Be sure to join us next week when we will be discussing haunted airports. Our final story of the evening comes to us from Fort Sill, Oklahoma. My name is Brittany and I live on Fort Sill, Oklahoma in post housing. Ever since the day we moved in this house, we have had a ghost or two. The activity has escalated extremely since my husband went overseas in July. The day we moved in the house, my husband was on a previous deployment. My mom and I were making my bed, and all of a sudden we saw what looked like a cat's footprints walking on the bed and then lay down. We would feel a cat run up against our legs. At night you could hear it purring in the bed. It didn't bother me because it was just a ghost cat. After talking to our neighbors one night, we found out that the family that lived here previously had a mentally unstable daughter who fed their cat bleach and it died. So, hence, the cat ghost. He was friendly, so I didn't mind. But then it got worse. Upon my husband leaving this last time, something more sinister showed up. One night I awoke from sleeping and heard my daughter, who was 20 months old at the time, screaming like she was in pain. I have a baby monitor with video, so I looked at it fast and saw the shadow of a man next to her crib. I called the MPs and ran in there with a bat. There was nothing there, and my daughter was fast asleep. The MPs checked out my house, and there was no one inside and no signs of someone trying to get in. When I went to lay back down in bed, I looked at the monitor. It had frozen. You could see the shadow of the man backing away from the crib. I had blackout curtains in her room, so there's no light in there that anything could have reflected off of. The next morning, my oldest, who is 5, asked me, "Did you see him, Mom?" I then asked, "Who's him?" She said, "Him, Mom, the ghost man." She was asleep the whole time the MPs were here and couldn't have known what I had seen. I talked to my mom about the incident and she told me, "I didn't want to scare you, but a few nights before I went home, I heard Lily talking to someone at 4 a.m. I went to check on her and she was playing her new game, Frozen Chutes and Ladders, with someone. I took the game from her and put it on the table, and when I came back out of her room from putting her back to bed, all the pieces were standing up. They were knocked down when I put it on the table. About a week after this happened, I was going to bed. Well, I had to use the bathroom, and afterwards I went to shut the bathroom door behind me. I laid down in bed, and then I heard the door open. I turned the light on from my phone, and sure enough, the door was open. I closed it again, listened for the click, and went back to my bed. Then I heard it open. I once again shut the door, listened for the click, and then turned around, and it opened right away. I yelled, "Can you please just fucking stop?" And then the door shut in my face, and I heard a little boy's laugh. I don't have a son that is living, so it definitely wasn't my kids. The next morning, my neighbor asked me if I had a rough night babysitting, because they could hear the little boy laughing at 12 midnight, 2 a.m., and 4 a.m. I do not have a living male child, and I was not babysitting. Then Kenzie, my youngest, woke up with a huge bruise with 3 scratch marks on her spine a few nights after that. Then a few days ago, I was chased out of my house by something. I could hear its feet chasing me, and when I made it to the living room, it pushed me. Then, not last night, but the previous one, was the icing on the cake. First, my daughter was sitting at the coffee table eating dinner. She has a little lawn chair that she was sitting in. She wasn't even moving when the chair slid out from under her and she hit her face on the table. This isn't the first incident of her being pushed down by whatever's here. Then a couple of days ago, I dropped some papers under my bed. Well, the other day I was sitting on my bed talking to a friend. All of a sudden I heard something crawling out from under my bed, towards my feet. I saw the bed skirt flutter like something was coming out. I ran as fast as I could, grabbed my kids and put them in the car and waited for my best friend to come over to check out my house. I'm moving back home until my husband comes back because I'm terrified of my house. Well, there you have it, folks. Another episode in the books. Be sure to join us next week when we will be discussing haunted airports. Take care, everyone.